Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our webinar on the successful path to servitization. This is the first of a series of capacity building webinars we are organizing in the context of the project Efficiency as a Service. In recent years, digitalization and Industry 4.0 have transformed operations substantially. Industrial digitalization is reshaping opportunities for business model innovation. Increasingly, we are seeing industrial companies have started to bundle their products with services to offer comprehensive solutions to their customers. Such a change brings significant cultural and corporate challenges. As they servitize, companies are confronted with a new set of dynamic in their relationship with their customers and need to adapt and develop the required capability to deliver these solutions. It's a transformation that requires orchestrated change on multiple domains. Servitization is the transformational journey a company goes through when transitioning from being a supplier of basic products and services towards becoming a provider of integrated solutions delivered through a pay-per-use or a pay-per-outcome agreement. Today, our speaker will share with you their insights on the transformational journey to an as-a-service offering. How can partnerships support such a transformation? What are the key success factors? And what are the barriers and levers to scaling up an as-a-service offering? And also how to assess your readiness to servitize. My name is Mirataya. I'm a circular economy expert at Agoria, the Belgian Federation of Technology Companies. And I'm joined by Dimitris Karamitsos, who is the Senior Energy Efficiency Business Developer at BASE, the Basel Agency for Sustainable Energy, and will be your host and moderator for today's webinar. So I would like to address a very warm welcome to today's speaker. Our first speaker will be Christian Levy. Christian is Deputy Managing Director of Econocom Lease at Econocom Belux. He is also the Executive Board Member of the Belgian Lease Association. Christian has a career of over 30 years in financing and leasing. Econocom acts as a financing partner and supports company and governments in the implementation of as-a-service business model, product-service combination, and leasing solutions. And the Econocom Group conceives, finances, and facilitates the digital transformation of firms and public organizations through a combination of project financing, equipment distribution, and digital services. Christian will share with you market trends and practical implications with regards to servitization. Our second speaker, Florian André, is the founder and CEO of P2S Management Consulting, an innovative consultancy specialized in helping manufacturers develop their industrial subscription business models. Before founding P2S, Florian worked as a consultant and project manager in a variety of sectors. Florian is also a guest lecturer at the Solvay Business School, teaching master students about subscription models. Florian will share with you the pathway to developing a subscription model and some key success factors. And our final speaker, Dr. Wim Cohen, is a postdoctoral researcher at the School of Business and Economics of the Vrije University of Amsterdam. He obtained his PhD at the Faculty of Business and Economics at the University of Antwerp. His research interests include strategy, innovation management, and entrepreneurship, specifically related to servitization, digitalization, and sustainability. His work has been published in journal books such as the Belgrave Handbook of Servitization and Practices and Tools for Servitization. Will share with you today the results of his research on barriers to scaling up product service business model, but also on the readiness to servitize. This webinar is being recorded. There will be a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. So if you have any questions, do use either the chat function or the Q&A function to include your questions. Your microphones are muting. However, if you would like to address a question directly to the speaker, please do raise your hand. So I will, before giving the floor to the speakers, I would like to say a few words about the Efficiency as a Service project. The project is funded by the European Union Horizon 2020 Research and Innovation Program and is taking place in 3 countries, in Belgium, in the Netherlands, and in Spain. And the aim of the project is to accelerate the market adoption of energy efficient solutions by enterprises through an as-a-service business model. So why as a service? There are a number of barriers that prevent organization from investing in energy efficient technologies. One of these barriers is the higher upfront cost that is associated to highly efficient equipment and uncertain returns with regards to such investments, and also a higher risk perception. There are also a competing priority in terms of investments, where organizations look more often to invest in their core business rather than in energy efficiency. So servitization is seen as a way to remove these market barriers by shifting the energy efficiency cost from an expensive high capital expenditure to a transparent lower risk operating expenditure. To explain a bit the efficiency as a service business model in a nutshell, what does this model look like? So the supplier is responsible for the design, the installation, the financing, the operation and maintenance, the performance and the end of life of the equipment, and also cover the energy costs related to the consumption, the equipment consumption. And the efficiency as a service customer simply pays a single monthly fee for the solution or the services that are delivered. So we have seen lately a lot of developments with regards to as a service solution in various segments of the economy and of industry, so much that the concept of everything as a service is more and more used. We see as a service solution in the energy sector. We see energy as a service, as a service solution in the transport sector, and also in the building sector. We know of heating as a service, cooling as a service, lighting as a service, but we also now have models like roofing as a service, facade as a service. So it's really in many aspects of the industry, in the agricultural sector and many sectors where this business model is emerging. But in most cases, while you have some circumstances or some cases where this business model has been applied for decades now and are in a very mature stage. You've all heard about Xerox and Rolls-Royce. So these have been implemented for years now, but most of the servitization offering or as a service offering are more in the emerging phase. And the aim of the project is now to help scale up these emerging servitization model in energy efficiency. So what we have developed so far, we've developed a toolkit to support companies in developing as a service offering. So we've developed a standardized efficiency as a service agreement. It's the agreement which establishes the rights and obligation of the parties to the contract, namely the provider and the customer. This agreement serves as a supporting document for companies that want to develop their own as a service offering, but also it's here to create trust and to accelerate a bit the buy-in with regards to the adoption of such a business model from the customer side, but also from the financing sector side. We've also developed a price modeling tool. This tool enables you to run a rough preliminary estimation of the payback time of the EIS model. And so you can run some simulations in order to assess the payback time according to, for instance, the unitary price that you've established for your service consumption, and also the estimated consumption of services from the customer side. We've also done a mapping of risks that are associated to such a business model, so that stakeholders that engage in this business model are aware a bit also about the risks and limitation of such a business model. So we are in the process also of mapping the stakeholders that are engaged in or want to engage in efficiency as a service. So on the provider side, so either company that already have energy efficient solution that they offer as a service, but also company that want to develop such a solution. And we also are mapping the enablers, because as you will see during today's presentation, efficiency as a service, or generally speaking as a service model, are really about creating partnership to be successful. So companies will need partners to develop their solution, be it on the financing side, for the insurance part, for the IoT, etc. And so the idea is also to be able to map the stakeholders that are engaged in enabling such a business model. So mapping the stakeholder, it's also with the name of matchmaking, of putting in contact enablers and suppliers, but also suppliers and customers. So the idea is to enable the development of pilot projects. And what we are doing as well within the project is awareness raising, because there is still a need for communication and awareness raising with regard to such a business model, and capacity building also to support companies that want to engage. And this webinar is actually part of the capacity building events that we are organizing. So that's it for the introductory part. I'm very happy now to be able to give the floor to Christian Levy, our first speaker for today's webinar. Christian, the floor is yours. Thank you.
We define ourselves as a digital general contractor in Europe, and being the first. And what we do is indeed coordinate and take the responsibility for the entire chain of a digital project on procurement, services, and financing. And this is done based on customers' needs, of course. What sets us apart is indeed this mix of the three capacities of delivering products, putting services, and offering the financing, and as an example, as a service. My topics for today: some market trends to start. What is it then, equipment as a service? What are the implications? And then the questions and answers, they will be at the end of the three presentations. Basically, market trends. Of course, we live in a complex world with many issues to be tackled about competition, customer needs, geopolitical situations, the transition for the climate, and so on. And as a service will be an enabler to match those issues. What we can notice on the market is that there is a shift from the purchaser perspectives in their buying function. First of all, they look more to functions than to technical specification. In the past, many people defined exactly what they wanted. They want such heating system, or they want such airco, or they want such model of lights, of lamps. At this moment, they focus on the results, on the function. They want heating, they want light, they want fresh air, they want compressed air. And at the end, it's not really relevant which model, which type, which brands. Then they focus on the function. A second trend, which is quite general, and Mira introduced this, is that people and companies move from owning an equipment to the added value of using it. And these trends match perfectly in this as a service. And then, of course, what is important in this approach is that when you buy an equipment, and maybe later you will have, as a user of the equipment, some cost, it's quite difficult when you are not experienced to identify properly all costs. So a trend which is really coming now is to have a full view of the total cost, what we call total cost of ownership, of total cost of use of this equipment. A part is really clear at the start, which is a purchase price, but many aspects of the total cost are coming over the future, and buyers do not see exactly what it means. And to take the example of IT, what we see in IT is that 30% is seen at start being the hardware cost, but in fact 70% of the cost of IT is coming later through management, to deployment, to maintenance, to replacement, and so on. And the total cost of ownership leads us also to the concept of total life cycle cost, including the cost of use, the benefits, the risks, the opportunities, and in some cases, the externalities and the social or environmental consequences of your decision, like, for example, all the climate issues. And then the last trend on the market is the switch from the linear economy to the circular economy, and the linear economy being based on product, on ownership, on obsolescence, on closed environment and throwing away, and on linear models, while the trend also pushed by the climate issues is going to service usage, life cycle extension, sharing, and circular models. Concretely, what does it mean? Basically, an as-a-service model is switching from a low value creation of selling products, which is becoming a commodity over the time. Little differentiation, maybe price differentiation, sometimes quality differentiation, but as I told you, the total cost is not always perceived by the buyer. And in fact, the trend also is to switch from selling a product to creating an experience, to delivering a result, to unburden the customer. So the supplier is becoming the strategic, the operational, and the economical partner of his customer. It creates more value, it's help differentiating, and you are more relevant, and you become a partner of your customer. If I take the example of IT, what does it mean in IT and as a service company, as a service offer? First, advice on helping the customer to define his needs. Secondly, helping the financing of the solution, delivering the hardware. Then we have everything about delivering, having guaranteed deliver time, so a buffer stock, also helping the good maintenance and what we call break and fix and repair of equipment. Replace when some equipment is in default and the user needs immediately a new device to replace his old device, and to be sure that everything is available at the right time. And then, of course, in case of fuller outsourcing, everything about support, help desk, software maintenance, and at the end, taking back and giving a second life to this equipment. So what it goes on is the full life cycle of the product. And basically, as a service, is managing the full life cycle of a product and delivering an added value. If we transfer that to cash flow, the traditional solution, which is the blue line, the customer is confronted with a first investment at start, which is a high cash out. And then over the time, depending on the equipment and depending on the lifetime, there are some operational costs, sometimes expected, sometimes unexpected. Sometime after some years, you have to do refurbishing. And the customer is not sure, and that is the yellow line, is not sure about the level of output, about the level of performance. And in fact, the as a service offer is transforming this variable cash flow in the pink line, which is below, which is one constant fee. In the case of energy as a service, it's maybe not always constant because also the energy consumption can be variable about a year. But basically, everything about energy will be constant and also a constant performance. The customer gets a guaranteed service level agreement by which it doesn't care about the level of performance. It is the responsibility of the supplier. So what it brings to the customer is peace of mind, an experience based on usage. It's a robust, flexible, and scalable solution, which means that if he needs a certain power and tomorrow he needs twice that same, the supplier does that smoothly. There are no breakouts in the output. It's based on operational excellence, so it's continuous measurement of the performance through service level agreements and improvement plans by a dialogue and a partnership between supplier and customer. The solution is constantly improved over the time. The costs are predictable, no surprises, no peaks and no downs, and it brings a higher value at an attractive price for customers. Technology helped adding value to this solution with connection of the devices through remote systems. You get information from the customer, you can interpret, you can learn from this information. You see how the customer is using your equipment. You can remotely change and adapt some configuration. And by getting more information about your customer, you can design your product a better way and your solution a better way. At Econocom, we have a lot of customers that are related to financial sectors using as a service, which shows that as a service is not only a financial solution. And you see companies like Belfius, BNP, Deutsche Bank, Beobank, and so on, the National Bank of Belgium. They are customers because not only of the money, of course, they have money to buy equipment, but they see that buying and managing themselves is complex, takes a lot of energy, and they want to keep focus on their core business. And by outsourcing this, they get a guaranteed level of service by which they increase the value for themselves. This scheme is probably known by most of you, but it's a categorization of the as-a-service models. You see there are different grades, different gradations of complexity of the product service solutions, the as-a-service solutions. On the left side, you have the pure product and then product-oriented services, which are services that are just linked to the sale of a product. And from the middle of the screen to the right of the side of the screen, you have use-oriented services, which are basically simple lease solutions, sharing, renting, product pooling, and pay-per-use, but really linked to a specific product. And then the more you go to the right, the more you are focusing on the service, and you don't look exactly at which type, which model, which brands. You are interested in the result. And then pure service solutions are things that are not related to assets. I would say in our webinar for today, we will focus on use-oriented and more on result-oriented as a service. But each supplier needs to look in his own organization, in his own added value, to see, am I focusing on use-oriented or result-oriented services? What does it imply? First, as a service is not only a lease or a renting solution. There is much more than that. Secondly, as I told you, as a service supplier, you need to choose which kind of service you bundle, which kind of complexity, which kind of mean or result obligation you take towards your customer, and how you differentiate from competition. Also very important when you are an existing company selling products, how do you combine your traditional selling model to your as a service offer? What we see is that customers that are used to buy, if you offer them an as a service solution, they will first start to debundle your services and to know how much is the hardware, how much is the service, how much is this, how much is that. Be very careful when you start offering your as a service to differentiate, and maybe in some cases to offer this only to some new type of product, of new type of solution that you didn't sell so far. Lease is not the basis, but lease is embedded in an as a service, because basically what is the definition of lease is putting an asset at the disposal of a customer in exchange of a certain price. So as a service solution, focus on the service but they will have some financial models and some lease components embedded in the model, which will lead, and that will be the subject of the next webinar, which leads to certain financial consequences for yourself and for your customer on the balance sheet, on the P&L. I will not go in detail here, but you will see the next time under Belgian rules, under international rules, what are the consequences of embedded leases in as a service contracts. About the ownership, if you read text and if you listen to presentation about as a service, you will often hear that in an as a service, the supplier is remaining the owner and is keeping ownership of the equipment. It's not always the case, and I would say a few companies are able to offer everything themselves, to be the owner of the equipment, to deliver all the services themselves. What we see in practice is that many as a service solutions imply co-creation and cooperation between the supplier and some partners, for example, to keep ownership on a temporary basis out of the balance sheet of the supplier, to guarantee some services of some level of services, to offer a technological solution for the digital side. So cooperating is key in as a service solution. And also very important is what we call the residual value. In an as a service model, are you asking the full price of the first equipment, of that equipment to the first user, or do you cover only a part of that equipment? I would say normally to make as a service attractive, the first user should not pay 100% of the price of the equipment. As a supplier, you should anticipate for the value at the end, and if the equipment has a value, a part of that value is given back to the first user, and it's your responsibility in a circular model to find a second life, to find a second user of that equipment, so that your as a service proposal is attractive in terms of price. In many as a service solutions we see with people and companies that are not taking residual value, the customer are quickly debundling and going back to a sale model because they prefer to buy and to do themselves some part of the services. So if you take a residual value, if you give back to the customer a part of that second-hand value, you will make your proposal more attractive, and you will really make a value-added solution for your customer. As a service has implications. If I go back to the graph I showed you with user-oriented, result-oriented, and so on, in terms of non-performance, you see clearly that in a traditional sale model, and I'm sorry, there is a typing error in this graph. The first column should not be product as a service, but just product. Really, in a sale model, everything about non-performance, about default, about second life, about life cycle management, and is on the shoulders of the customer. You are in a transactional mode, and it's a one-off, is taking responsibility of all the steps. And the more you go to the right side, the more you have product-oriented services, user-oriented services, and result-oriented services. The obligations move to the supplier in various steps, depending on the complexity. But you see that in the middle, the user-oriented, it's a mix of obligation and rights between the suppliers and the customer. But on the result-oriented, you have most of the obligations on the supplier side, with service level agreements, maybe some penalties if it doesn't match the SLA. And in the case of energy as a service, is taking the responsibility of consumption, of price energy variations, on energy savings, and is full responsible. So basically, non-performance is switching to the supplier. End of life and second life, by taking the residual value, is going also to the supplier. The supplier is responsible of giving a second life. the total life cycle management, it's on the shoulders on the supplier. And the mindset, as I told you, is added value. And on the financial side, there are consequences that we will go over next time. But basically, in the transaction model, everything is paid up front. It's on the customer's balance sheet and it's depreciated. The more you go to the right, the most complex it becomes. And in some cases, it is on the balance sheet of the customer. In some cases, it's the balance sheet of the supplier, and it has consequences also for the P&L of the supplier. And then on the legal side, of course, you switch from a single one-off sale, which guarantees and this kind of thing. And the more you go to the right, the more you will add services, service level agreements, cooperation, differentiation, ways to solve disputes. It's not just a one-off. And that means that, of course, service contracts are more complex. And that's one of the reasons why this Energy as a Service project has proposed a standard contract to help suppliers who want to go in this direction of more complexity, to make their life easier and to help them switching from the simple one-off to the partnership model. We have at Econocom published some documents, videos, and so on this subject. You will find here the link. We have centralized all this information under one caption of our internet site. And also, we have published 3 years ago, my colleague Hilde Janssens, with the help of Vlaanderen Circulaire, more than 100 pages report on this subject, not only as a service, but everything about the financial consequences of the circular economy, the circular economy. It's something you can download and it's available on our web. So here are my references. Don't hesitate to ask questions. I'm available, of course, at the end of this session. And the questions will come later. I'm very happy to be here and to answer your questions at the end. And I give back the word to my colleague.
Thank you very much, Christian, for all these insights. So please, if you have questions for Christian, do type them in the Q&A function. I will now give the floor to Florian for his presentation on subscription model.
Yes.
Yeah. Perfect.
Perfect. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. Thanks. Hello everyone. I'm Florian. Mira, first of all, thanks a lot for the invitation. What am I going to talk about? I'm going to present you quickly what we do at P2S, where, let's say, business is going, industrial business is going. How does an industrial subscription model? So we've put subscriptions as a kind of big topic, and within that there is the as a service business model, there is the product service system. So we've put that as a subscription business model. We understand it as subscription business models. And then the very interesting part we'll be talking about how does a subscription business model transformation look like, and kind of what are the things to consider, and how to get started with your subscription journey. So to present P2S stands for Products to Subscriptions. So we are a innovation consultancy, a niche innovation consultancy specialized in these transformation journeys towards a subscription, towards a as a service business model. And we're a team, a dynamic team based here in Brussels, and we've completed 4 projects so far in Germany and here in Belgium. We're specialized, as I said, in subscription business models, and we've interacted with more than 200 companies that have launched subscriptions. And so we know about the best practices, the kind of do's and don'ts in order to, let's say, accelerate the transformation process and not do the same mistakes as other companies have maybe done, and kind of inspire yourself on their best practices. And we do that with a tailored action plan on one side, where kind of step by step we have different workshops which we go through, and then the ecosystem. So it's a subscription expert ecosystem. There are more than 30 partners. And these are partners that help in the transformation journey, such as Econocom, for instance, for the financing part. So kind of these are all partners that are useful on a transformation phase. So yes, this was, let's say, about P2S. So where is business actually going, let's say? So what we've seen is that the way people and companies consume has changed. There are new requirements. It's moving from, as Christian said as well, from ownership towards usership. We want results, we want a peace of mind, we want flexibility, and we want simplicity. So we saw a real change in the past decades from a product-centric mindset, let's say, towards adding more and more services to that, towards becoming where we are today. It's relationships. People and companies are after relationships, and there are a lot of companies already that have reinvented themselves, and all these companies used to sell, or most of them used to sell products in a traditional way, and they've reinvented themselves away from this product mindset towards a service mindset, towards a recurring subscription mindset. I'm sure most of you know most of these companies here. To kind of underline this a bit further, pretty much any industry is being disrupted and is reinventing themselves towards these recurring relationships kind of business models. When we look at consumer goods, razor blades, for instance, home, so we have IKEA furniture as a service, mobility, of course, which are offered already as a subscription, where kind of compared to a traditional lease where you're stuck with your car for 4 to 5 years, in a subscription model you can cancel pretty much any time. Link & Co, for instance, one of the companies, cloud services, of course, the SaaS. And so you see many industries have been transformed to these as a service models. What is the logic, or how to visualize, let's say, this change in logic? On the left side, we have a transactional model where you sell a product through different channels, and different companies are responsible for different things. Installation, company A, company B is taking care of the maintenance, company C of the repair, company D of the financing, etc., etc. In a subscription model, the idea is to kind of pool everything together and to form an experience around the customer by kind of taking all these services, all these companies, and gathering them into a seamless experience, let's say, around the customer. So it's customer centricity. This is kind of the key word here to remember. Now about industrial subscriptions, which are pretty particular, let's say. The idea, as I said before, is that as a supplier, so it can be a manufacturer, but it can be a distributor as well. So kind of let's say the competition changes. A distributor can be a competitor to the manufacturer and vice versa. The idea is, of course, the product, the equipment stays key, but then you add a series of complementary services to your offering, kind of installation, financing, spare part management, consumption insights, etc., etc. And you kind of form a complete solution where on the left side, then you have the customer, which kind of subscribe to the solution as if it would be Netflix. And then these payments are recurring. They can be either time-based, they can be usage-based, they can be output-based, or they can be on some sort of hybrid model. In most cases, what we've seen is that these subscription models are, in most cases, a combination of equipment, software, and some sort of consumables in some cases. Yeah, for instance, Rolls-Royce, what they do with the turbines of the engines is they offer power by the hour. So of course, the equipment, the turbines are key. The software is key as well, and all these consumables, all the spare parts which are included in this pack are key as well. There are a lot of examples in the industry, whether it be Rolls-Royce and Atlas Copco with their compressed air as a service, Xerox with the photocopying machines, Trumpf, the laser cutters with the paper part model. So we see more and more companies, manufacturers that are developing subscription models. Here it's a bit to visualize, let's say, the potential, or sometimes the missed opportunity also for a manufacturer. Kind of, okay, the one-off sale provides already some nice value, but then on top of that, the aim is really to add a lot of complementary services and to kind of bundle them into one subscription offering. So here the difference between the two worlds is a bit, okay, in a traditional model, the customer buys the machine, and then it's up to the customer to kind of find, let's say, a financing partner and to handle the financing itself. IoT and maintenance, sometimes it's managed by the manufacturer, but sometimes the customer has to take care of it himself. In the subscription model, the logic is somewhat different. I mean, here we've written manufacturer, but it can be, let's say, it's more supplier would be more accurate in the sense that it can be a distributor as well. But it's really up to the supplier to manage everything for the customer. So to take care of the financing, to take care of all the connected services, the maintenance, etc., and then to offer really a very easy, let's say, solution and a full solution to the customer. I'm not going to go through this as Christian went through it, but these subscription models, I mean, we see them emerging a lot, and because of certain factors, let's say, of course, technology with all these sensors, IoT, they enable these business models. But then also on the customer side, customer want to focus on their core business and want to outsource what's not core to their business to someone else. Then in terms of differentiation as well, competition is rising. There's a lot of pressure on price. Asian companies, companies from Asia, excuse me, are getting better and better in terms of quality, in terms of price as well. So kind of how can we, let's say, Western world companies differentiate ourselves? It's based on services and based on what we know on data, which we know about the customer. Then we have supply chain flexibility. Of course, if you plan something in advance, and if you know that you will have this many machines coming in over the next years, then it's going to be easier to plan. This is true as well for the cash flow sensitivity, both from a perspective from a supplier, but also from a customer perspective. There are a lot of advantages. And then in terms of reporting, in January 2019, there has been some changes to the IFRS rules stating that, let's say, traditional leasing have to figure on the balance sheets, whereas these as a service models can, in many cases, be off balance sheet, both for the manufacturer and the final customer. Now we would like to talk a bit about the transformation journey. So kind of what has to be considered, what does it entail, this subscription transformation journey? is being talked about, these digital transformations, industry 4.0, etc. And a lot of companies see them as kind of using the technology in order to optimize, to gain efficiency, to do some cost saving. But as we see it, the biggest opportunity lies not in kind of, let's say, optimizing the operational side, but more on how you sell something, how you commercialize something. So in the sense that kind of you completely change your business model from selling a product towards selling a solution over time. And so this is kind of what manufacturers should probably more capitalize on, and which will have better impact, let's say, on the bottom line financials. What is important in a subscription transformation is that it's going to impact every single function of your company. So whether it be on a strategic level, on a financial level, on a product level, on an engineering level, on a marketing level, etc., everything is going to be impacted. So it's not a minor innovation to roll out. It's really a big game changer, let's say, to set up a subscription model. So what we have done is we've listed some of it's just a small portion of the obstacles, or let's say critical capabilities, which are required if a manufacturer wants to implement a subscription business model. So in terms of value proposition and pricing, of course, it's not easy. How many packs are you going to offer? Is a subscription model durable for every single of our machines, or not? What do competitors offer? Are we going to price it on a time-based model, so let's say a more traditional model, or are we going to more towards a usage or output oriented model? Then in terms of digitalization, this is really a prerequisite that the machines are connected one another and the data can be collected. If it's not the case, it absolutely has to be done. But then, of course, I mean, with all this data is good, but what are you going to do with the data, and how are you going to cross the different data with one another in order to kind of deliver more value to the customer? Because it's all about delivering more value to the customer, which the customer has to understand in the end. From a financial and legal perspective, of course, the financial structure, which we'll talk about also next week, is it going to be something, let's say, in a triangular scheme structure, or is it kind of in line? Do you have to finance it in-house, or but if you want to scale it, probably your cost of capital, as Christian said, the WACC is not the, I mean, it's not the best investment probably to finance your own machines. And so this is why it's required, or at least recommended, to partner up with external financing partners. In terms of the contractual relationships as well, there will be a lot more responsibility, in a subscription model. So it has to be sure that and made sure that kind of the contracts are bulletproof. Then on the payment kind of sphere, you're going from a traditional, say, towards a recurring billing. What are the KPIs which you need to track? Kind of monthly recurring revenue, customer lifetime value. These KPIs are different than the traditional accounting KPIs. And then in terms of IT infrastructure, your current ERP system, your current CRM system, are they adapted to, are they accustomed to kind of operationalize this new business model? And then to conclude this part, probably the biggest, I mean, not probably, it is the biggest obstacle. It's culture. So people within the company, colleagues, have to change their mindset from, okay, we're going to sell a product, and then in most cases the transaction and the relationship ends, and towards we're going to provide value, a solution over time to the customer. And so this change in mindset is what we've seen in most cases to be the most challenging factor. concretely how to get started. So what we've done is we've interacted with more than 200 companies, as I said, and we've come up with an action plan, which is a kind of roadmap based on all these best practices about, okay, what is company X and what is company Y doing, and put them together into a series of 20+ workshops where kind of step by step, chapter by chapter, we put in place together with the manufacturer the subscription business model. And so here in chapter 1, it's really kind of, okay, what is the customer truly after? How can we we as a manufacturer bring a peace of mind towards our clients? Which machines need to be connected, which features should be monitored, and then we try to we define a draft, let's say, subscription model, and there's a lot of hypotheses, of course, which have to be discussed with customers to collect as much feedback as possible. Once this is done, this exploratory phase, let's say, it's all about defining a more concrete subscription offering, and so you decide, okay, how can each subscription model be actually tailored, personalized to a given customer? So you standardize as much as possible with the product, and then personalization comes with the services. Then you have to consider, okay, packages. How many packages are we going to, subscription packages are we going to offer to customers? Should it be like a bronze, silver, gold thing? Should it be some pack related to certain complementary services? All of this has to be discussed. In terms of pricing, as we said, are you going for a time, a usage, or output based, knowing that the responsibilities increase also with it? The financing structure, we've talked about it, the contracts, all these are things which have to be accounted for and considered. And then once, let's say, the subscription offering is almost ready, then it's time to look, okay, internally, what do we need to adapt? New roles are going to emerge. So at the moment, if you sell something, the sale is kind of the end point in most cases of the relationship, whereas in a subscription model, the sale is the starting point. So the logic is completely different. So you need maybe customer success managers, account managers, which will differ from the traditional sales model. Then you need to consider how's the customer going to pay? Is the current ERP system able to operationalize all these recurring billings? Is it linked to the inventory, etc., etc.? And then another point which we've seen, which we've done a training a few weeks ago about, was training these sales reps, which at the moment sell a product one shot towards selling a solution over time. So the logic is completely different there. And what we've seen also, okay, one of the decisions is, should traditional salespeople also offer, also sell subscription models, or should they focus? I mean, should they focus on both traditional and subscription, or subscription only? And then the last phase, this is once the subscription is launched, it's about growing it, scaling it. What are the KPIs? How do you do cross and upselling? So this is, let's say, the complete transformation journey. And then I want to have a quick word about this ecosystem, where there are different players which are required. And what we see, all these leading companies that have implemented the subscription model, they've partnered up with the external partners, whether it be for the financing part, whether it be for the IoT part, whether it be for the contractual side, for the risk management, insurance, etc., etc. So the key to success and the key to kind of move quickly, but also further away, further is by partnering up with companies. I see we're a bit short of time. Mira, just let me know if you want to kind of move to the next one. Otherwise, I would talk rapidly about one case here, a concrete case which we've worked on, where the problem was, okay, it's a distributor which at the moment sells to installers, which sell to final customers. The problem is that the distributor had no relationship and no knowledge, no data about how the equipment is, how their equipment is actually being used. So no data about monitoring, no optimization, nothing at all. And so there were also high, let's say, upfront investments. And the idea was to reinvent themselves towards a subscription model, where here they're selling directly to customers by partnering up, so not stealing some market share to the installers. But the idea was really to look, okay, what are customers after? They're after lower consumption, they're after monitoring, they're after outsourced operational risk. And so you take everything together, bundle it in a subscription model, and you say that, okay, you guarantee some quality. Here in this case, it was air quality, while optimizing for consumption. And in the end, the customer pays less because the big cost is associated to the consumption of the electricity in this case. And so by putting up a subscription model, they've managed to increase margins, to increase revenue, and this in a relatively short amount of time. So I don't think we've time for the key takeaways, but yes, I would be very happy to discuss afterwards how a subscription model could look like, what are the key obstacles, and yes, thanks for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Florian. Indeed, we're a bit running after the time. So thank you very much for all these valuable insights. I'll give the floor to Wim for your presentation. Yes.
Yeah, great.
Perfect. Thank you, Wim.
Can you see my slides? Can you hear?
Yes. Yeah, perfect.
Okay, great. Good to hear. So good morning, everybody, and thank you to the previous speakers for your interesting presentations already. So that also eases my presentation a little bit. I don't need to repeat what is servitization anymore, or why should you go for servitization. I will complement what you said previously by focusing a little bit on how to servitize as a company. Just very briefly, so my name is Wim Cohen. Mira already introduced me at the start. I did my PhD at the University of Antwerp on servitization, so together with my supervisors, among whom Paul Matthijsens, who also did a lot of work with companies in Belgium, industrial companies, on the topic of servitization. We wrote a couple of studies on servitization. I'm currently working in the Netherlands as a postdoctoral researcher, so I'm a little bit in a different moods today, because my Dutch colleagues, they all have a day off because it's King's Day today, so they're celebrating the birthday of their king. But I'd rather talk to you about servitization. I think that is probably more interesting than celebrating the king's birthday. So moving on, focusing on servitization. So I skipped a slide already on why you should servitize, because I think Christian and Florian already expressed that very well. But later on, if you have still questions about that, I can still answer some of those as well. But let's talk about something less obvious. It seems that servitization is the one and only solution, and it's something very easy for companies to achieve. But in fact, it is very difficult for companies. In one paper that was already written in 2005, a German researcher spoke about the service paradox. So what we see now is that companies recognize the importance of moving towards services and service-oriented business models, but they have difficulty transforming the organization and transforming their relationship with customers to more service-oriented business models. So what is happening in practice is that companies start to invest in a new service organization, in new services, but unfortunately, they do not reap sufficient benefits from these services in terms of money, in terms of revenues. So in fact, the investments that they make are higher than the outcomes of those investments. So companies run into what is called the service paradox, and they do not feel motivated anymore to pursue this new strategy because they think it doesn't work for their organization. So what exactly goes wrong inside companies to upscale their service-oriented business model? To find answers to that question, we did a qualitative research in, let's say, 2017-18 with a couple of companies in Belgium from different sectors. What I would like to add is that I'm not a particular expert for one or the other industry. I always go and talk to several companies, usually companies that somehow make products, sell products, and are moving towards services. So I have done research with companies from many different sectors. And for this study in particular, we spoke, for instance, with a company. I need to change a little bit how I see myself because I don't see my own slides entirely. Now it's a little bit better. So for this study, we spoke with a company that manufactures and sells security systems. Another company that we spoke to makes vinyl cutters and contour cutting plotters. Another one makes hydrogen generators, food scanners, electric switchboards, cool tanks, air compressors, and office furniture. So what is nice about this selection of companies is that we do not only speak with large manufacturers of original equipment, but also to smaller and mid-sized companies that sometimes are very niche players with less than 100 employees, but they sell products all around the world. So speaking to these companies, we had a couple of interviews with general managers, production managers, R&D managers, and also service managers. And after this series of interviews, we also did a few exercises with them, which helped us create a tool for other companies to help them upscale their service business models. So just to talk to you a little about what we exactly did. So after a few series of interviews, we found that there were in fact 3 types of barriers that are emphasized most by companies when moving towards more service-oriented business models. The first barrier is what we call a design barrier. So what we found was these companies that we spoke with, they mainly focus on improving their own products or internal processes, even though that they say that they are very customer-oriented providers or customer-intimate providers. When speaking to them, we actually find that they focus mainly on improving the product or internal processes. I see there's already a question popping up in the Q&A, but I will not focus on that right now, but hopefully afterwards we can discuss your question a little bit more. So what we saw was that they actually create services starting from the actual physical product rather than customer needs. Another element that we came across was that the R&D departments emphasize mostly the importance of product innovation or technological innovation. So when speaking about services, those departments would often add more technical features to the product. For instance, when making a printer, they would add more colors and higher quality printers, and they would consider that as a service to their customer. A third element is that service was usually added only later as an add-on to the product, rather than something that should be thought of from the beginning. So here there are a couple of examples. So for instance, the company providing security systems, they actually received some questions from customers. Can you also do something for us with analysis of camera footage, for instance, counting how many customers come in and out? And these were some things that the company could do actually if they were provided the time to do that. But unfortunately, all the attention and time and resources was focused on selling products, and there was little time to experiment with new service ideas. The company that sells contour plotters, like industrial printers also for customers, they were actually active worldwide, but they sold their products through a network of dealers. So when they came up with a very complicated high technology printer that requires quite some service, they were not able to offer that because their dealers would not have sufficient time to provide that type of service to their customers. A final example was the company that makes electric switchboards. In fact, when we were speaking to this company, there was a switch of CEOs, and the first CEO said that they were a very customer intimate company, very focused on serving customer needs. But the second CEO said that they're not customer intimate at all. They're actually focused on in decreasing costs and making switchboards more efficiently. So here we find that in these type of companies, we really noticed a design barrier, a lack of knowing how should we create services for our customers. A second type of barrier that we found was there's a second group of companies that had already moved forward in their service business, but they had more difficulties with rolling services out onto the market. So here they were really struggling with exploiting current product service system practices. The first group, they had more difficulty with exploring new services. This group has more difficulty exploiting current practices. So for instance, they have difficulty expanding their service to the market. Maybe they had one customer that was interested in a service and that they developed that for that customer, but how should we now sell this service to more customers? Also, another aspect, and that is also something that Florian also mentioned, is that you need to retrain your sales and delivery staff because you're not selling products anymore, you're selling services. There's in fact an entire paper from 2014 by some colleagues that wrote what is the ideal service salesperson and how does he or she compare with an ideal product salesperson. And there are some significant differences between those two types of salespeople. Also, you need to make your operations more efficient because you cannot always come up with a new service for every customer. You need to make your services more scalable. So you need to be efficient in how you deliver those services as well. And finally, you need to experiment with new revenue models. So that's also been discussed before. So moving from selling products to leasing products and ultimately providing a performance or a result even for customers. So experimenting with those new business or revenue models, that is something that most product-oriented companies with a long tradition are not very familiar with. To give you two examples, one company makes scanners for feet for podiatrists. So when you see a podiatrist, they usually make a scan of your foot. Now, those scanners are produced by a company. And when they switch from selling those scanners to more leasing them and actually making a whole service business model around these scanners, including training and so on for podiatrists, the company was a quite small company, and they noticed that they were not able to give sufficient service to all their customers because now they had to have much more contact with their customers than before. So in fact, the owners of the company were constantly driving around Belgium to provide these services, and that was not scalable for them anymore. So they needed to train other people inside the organization to do that in their stead. Another company was a company that makes office furniture for different companies. And they also experimented with leasing furniture, but then they would come across difficulties such as the furniture is handled much less carefully by the customer because they don't own it. So why should they take care of it? Because they only lease it. So they were not able to lease the furniture to, let's say, other customers, for instance. And also in that company, there was a barrier between the salespeople and the interior design people. So there was some struggle between who should offer advice to our customer. Is it the salesperson who comes in first, or is it the interior design people that come in second? There's some tension there as well. Then third, and finally, the third barrier that we came across was a more underlying barrier that we found into this in these companies, and we called it a logic barrier. So we found that some companies, they have a wrong organizational structure for providing services or developing new services. For instance, there was one company whose strategic decisions were in fact not made by the local company here in Belgium, but by the corporate headquarters who were active internationally. So they were not able to decide by themselves what type of services they should provide. And then the second, there's often the question, should we have a separate or an integrated service department, and a department that has their own business unit with profit and loss, or should it become more integrated in the rest of the company? A second issue that we came across, and that was also discussed before by Florian, was the issue of culture inside the company. Particularly in large product dominant companies with multiple business units and a long history, it is very difficult to convince the people that selling services can be very profitable. How should they become happy about selling services for very, very low prices when they're in fact building very big equipment and can sell that for often sometimes millions of euros. So there's a switch in culture that should usually take place. And here to give some more examples was, for instance, in one company, a large-sized multinational company, they said that the organization is structured around making products, producing products, and selling products. When people come up with a service ID, it's very difficult for them to convince the company of this, because there was not a process inside the company to validate these new service IDs. And then there was another company which we visited, and when we spoke to the general manager and the production manager and the R&D manager, we asked them, could we also speak with your service manager? And they said, of course you can. So, but in fact, we had to go outside of the company, go to another building, and there the service department would be sitting. So you could feel that there was a big mismatch inside this company between the service people and the rest of the organization. So bringing these barriers together, that doesn't mean that companies only are dealing with one barrier or the other, but some barriers are have a bigger effect today on the rest of the company. So actually what we see is the design and the rollout barrier, they're usually present on the business unit level, especially in bigger companies that sell different types of equipment or that are oriented toward different markets. We see that there's a design barrier inside the business unit, or a rollout barrier. So they have already thought about a service, but they have difficulty rolling it out onto the market. For instance, there was one company that where one business unit had already made the switch of not selling cool tanks anymore, but selling them ease of mind, as also Christian mentioned at the start of today. But when they had to cooperate with the production department inside the company, they were not so eager to provide ease of mind. They were more oriented towards making a product and having the business departments sell that product to the end client. In larger size companies, we see that the logic barrier exists more underneath and is a barrier for the entire organization. So speaking about culture, structure, in smaller companies, this is less of an issue because the CEO or owner, they can change all this by themselves. But in these bigger companies, that is something that is much more difficult to change for the entire organization. So I see we only have less than 15 minutes for the Q&A and everything. So I will keep this very short. Based on this research with this group of companies, we also experimented with a new tool for them to help them assess their own readiness for servitization. And the outcome was a book chapter that we wrote with a tool that companies can use and that I also suggest for you to use. So I will send this to Mira from Agoria, this chapter, so she can send it to you, and perhaps you can also use it inside your company. What this is that based on the literature, we came up with a number of questions to give you insight in how you're doing in terms of designing services, rolling out services into the market, and also about the general service orientation of the company. So we see all those different aspects here. And for each aspect, we have a few statements that you need to answer for your company, whether you agree with these statements or not at all. So after filling in this survey, you get something like this. So we did this with 2 companies, and the chapter describes the results of these companies. So after filling in the questionnaire, you get a spider diagram like this. And the bigger the diagram, it's of course based on your perception of the company. The bigger the diagram, the more likely that your company is ready for servitization. The smaller it is, the less likely it is. To just give you one example, for instance, let's say here, service orientation. We have many statements on what are the values of management, the behavior of management, values of employees and behavior of employees, all oriented towards service. If you see that you're scoring very low on these aspects, that means that your employees or managers are maybe not that service oriented yet. And that is maybe something you need to pay attention to. What could also be a fun exercise is that you do this exercise with a couple of people, strategic people inside the organization, and you compare the different results. Maybe some people think you're already a very service-oriented company, but other people have a different opinion. So you can have a nice discussion about this as well. So the key takeaways are, there are 3, based on what we saw in different companies, is that there are 3 types of organizational barriers that can all exist at the same time, but some barriers are more present than others. And these are a design barrier, how should companies develop new services, a rollout barrier, how should companies bring those services to the market and expand and scale. And the third one is a logic barrier. How should you as a company make a structure that is supportive of new services, and how can you change the culture of the organization as well? The second step is, the second takeaway is, in order to assess your readiness of servitization, it's best that you have a good discussion about this inside the company. And the chapter that I will give to you could be a good way to get the conversation started. So for further reading, for those of you who would like to read more about this, I do research about this with colleagues from Brazil, China also, and of course there were some papers of my PhD. So if you're interested or you have some trouble sleeping at night, because these are of course very scientific, boring papers, maybe you can skip some parts as well. So you can always access them through these links. They're usually behind a subscription wall as well. So if you'd like to have a full paper, don't hesitate to send me an email. I'm happy to provide you with the full paper as well. And I think we still have 10 minutes for Q&A. So I hope I make you all happy that we stopped on time. So I'm still here. Mira, it's up to you.
Thank you very much, Wim, and thank you for providing us material to better sleep at night. Although I'm afraid the challenges you've highlighted may keep some awake more than you think. Okay. But thank you very much for the presentation. So we have a couple of questions. So one first for Florian. So Florian, you've mentioned in the ventilation case that high upfront costs were an issue to attract certain customers. However, when thinking about ventilation, you expect customers to have an initial thought that they need it and they have to buy it. So experiencing the same response towards some products being heat exchanger, how do you break this buying expectation? And how do you position yourself in a buying market that even for fixed long-term equipment, it makes sense to shift towards a service model?
Yes, I don't know why my camera isn't working anymore, but yes, a tough one. So it's basically our, let's say, collective job responsibility to educate customers on that the service-based way of buying are more and more common. And what we've done with this customer is that we've shown that the total cost of ownership is much lower in a subscription model versus a traditional model. So this is kind of, let's say, the prerequisite. We have to show that, okay, the customer is better off in the end with this as a service model. And then in terms of customer education, what works well also is to refer and make just the customers aware that they're already actually subscribing to some of their things, whether it be the printers in the office, whether it be sometimes the light equipment from Signify, for instance, whether it be the coffee machine in the office. Subscription models are there already. And there's about educating the customer on kind of, okay, this is the new way of doing things. But I mean, what has to be put forward is always this kind of, the customer is better off with this subscription model. The thing we've done here concretely was, okay, on one side you have the direct sales model where you sell to the final customer, but then there's some sort of also lobbying which has to be done towards engineering offices, architects, things like that, where kind of you try to partner up, well, not convince them that your solution is your as a service solution is best, and that they recommend it to their kind of clients. I don't hope it somehow kind of answered the question.
Thank you, Florian. So Peter, if you want to perhaps reply to Florian's answer, please don't hesitate to raise your hand. I have a question from my side. So Florian, you've talked about developing standardized product, and a question a bit to the audience is, there are some companies that develop tailor-made solution or tailor-made technologies, I would say, and that are thinking to shift towards servitization or as a service business model. Do you think having tailor-made technological solution to customers can hinder the development of such a business model? I don't know if some of you have yes, a thought on that. Nobody?
I mean, the tailor-made, if I understand,
a tailor-made technological solution, yes. So you talked about standardizing products, but then tailor-made service solution. My question was about tailor-made technological solution. Is this could be a barrier to servitization when a company developed its even a product tailor-made to each customer, or not necessarily?
I mean, what we've seen, not one machine is or not one solution is the same as the other, and it still makes sense to offer it as a service, in the sense that if we take the example of the ventilation system, every single system, okay, the core machine is the same, but then everything else is tailor-made for the customer. And what I meant with the standardization with the product, yes, the product is in many cases the same, but the differentiation which is being done is by how you kind of configure your parameters for the customer, and this is done by the software which you offer to the customer. Certain customer wants to monitor the CO2 level but doesn't care about the humidity, for instance, and vice versa, and then sometimes you need to kind of cross-match it with movement detectors. I don't think that personalization is a barrier to an as a service model. Okay,
thank you, Florian. We have a question from Maxime Lazare, who asks, how to make residual value effective for a software solution. I don't know if this could be a question for you, maybe Christian.
That's a difficult one indeed, because basically when you designed software, and there are two types of software. Some are general, and there was a presentation last week, Mira, of Adobe, who switched from the sale model to the subscription model, and it was really successful, multiplying the value of the company by 16 in 8 years or something like that, because it's a standard model. It's like the Microsoft software. It's standard. When you have tailor-made software, and typically ERP that are based on the business of a specific customer, all developments you do for that specific customer are maybe difficult to duplicate or to reuse for another one. And then taking residual value on something like that is more, I would say, a guess that your customer at the end of your as a service model will still continue using your own software by which you can recover your residual value. But usually on software, the selling price is much higher than the cost price. So taking residual value can also be, I would say, less margin at the start, investing in the future. So it's a little bit depending on the case.
Okay, thank you, Christian. Another question from my side. So Christian, you've also mentioned something about for new as a service for new technologies. So you've got some companies, perhaps startups, that are developing new types of technologies and that are considering already now the as a service business model. So should such a company like a startup and developing really a new tech wants to develop an as a service model, should the development be also in terms of a gradation? We often see about when we go from product to service delivering, it often happens in step and in gradation. So is it also an advice to perhaps start by selling the products and add progressively services to make sure that everything runs smoothly? Or can it be also possible to really start off by providing an as a service solution with a newly developed technology? I don't know if yeah.
That's exactly the choice to be made. Are you offering your as a service model in competition with your traditional sale model, or do you differentiate and you offer only a subscription model? Probably Florian has more experience, but that's the challenge we see frequently on startups. My recommendation would be to start immediately subscription and not to put subscription in competition with sale, but it has financial implications. And indeed, for the startup, it can be easy to sell and get some cash flow to invest in the future of the company. But that's really a strategic choice to be made at start, and you risk shooting in your own foot if you offer both.
Okay, thank you for this. Okay, thank you. Yeah, sorry. Would any of the other speaker want to add something to that?
Yeah, I mean, in the end, as we see it, it's about offering more flexibility to final customer and kind of having a broader portfolio, whether it be products and services, of kind of, okay, here we have this product A, which the customer can buy, but they can also subscribe to it. So in that sense, I would see it more as offering more flexibility to the final customer rather than kind of cannibalization of the internal model. And maybe jumping back on what you said also before, you don't have to go all in a output-based, result-based model straight from the beginning. You can kind of set up step by step a subscription model, go via a more traditional time-based model towards a usage-based model, and then the end goal is this as a service, complete result-oriented model. So it's a gradual process. This is very important to keep in mind. And then by offering, let's say, the time-based model, you collect data which will then be utilized in order to kind of, let's say, accept these additional responsibilities from the as a service model and go towards the output-based model.
Thank you. Florian. Thank you to all the speakers. I see we've reached the end of the webinar. Before closing the webinar, I would like briefly to talk to you about the upcoming webinars that we have. So we have one webinar next Monday on the 2nd of May, in which we will look at the efficiency as a service business model a bit more from a risk perspective. So we will share with you different scenarios under which the ownership of the equipment could be transferred to a third party. We will also a bit explore what are the rights and obligations of the parties within an efficiency as a service agreement, and how can some of the risk within this business model be tackled within the contract. And my colleague Ruth will also share with you the latest development in energy policy at EU level and Belgium level in light of energy communities, and explore possible implication for efficiency as a service agreement. And we have then our third and final webinar next Thursday on the financial and accounting implication of as a service business model. And here Christian Levy and Baptiste Desbois will share some of the financing mechanisms that are available to suppliers of as a service solution, and also they will share what is needed in order to maximize a bit the chance of securing a partnership with a financing partner. So what do you need to know to develop your offer and to secure a partnership with a financing institution? And also we will look into the accounting implications of an as a service business model, and especially looking into what are the conditions that would need to be met for an equipment to be off the balance sheet of the customer. So from the IFRS rules and also from the Belgium GAPS perspective. So I would like to thank again all of you for attending this webinar. A big thank you to our speakers, Christian, Florian, and Wim. Thank you really very much for all your insightful presentation. There are some questions that we can address later on. So if you have any questions, please do send them to us and we can keep the conversation going. Thank you very much. I wish you all a very good day, and we talk soon.
Thank you, Mira.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a nice day.